Jaya Radha Madhava Gopi Jana Gopi Jana Raja Jana Jana Amana Jaya Radha Madhava Madhava Antarat Srimad Bhagavatam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishnu Bhutale Purvani Vichani Nirvisitsasimra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're going to read 2 chapters. Then what's the plan?
1 chapter from this. Well, less than half from this one.
Oh. Oh. Oh.
But it's the chapter I've sent you the corresponding chapter from the Bible.
Oh, so I'm going to speak on those chapters when we're going
Yeah,
to.
it's the program to a poetic rendition. It's much more concise.
I need a volunteer to read
I'm sure we can read.
so I can meditate.
Someone, sure.
You have someone who's good at reading?
I'll start. This is page 279. Start with the first section. 2 more seconds. Who else? 1 more second.
All right,
Krishna squeeze. Kalindi. Some time elapsed, the Pandavas, so cherished by the Lord, survived the plots against them, and their kingdom was restored. When they built in the Prastha as the new seat of their throne, Lord Krishna went to visit them as he was always prone. When Kunti's 5 outstanding sons saw Krishna had arrived, they rose as if 5 senses of a lifeless man revived. To see his loving face filled them with overwhelming joy. As they embraced the Lord, each felt his problems were destroyed. Lord Krishna paid obeisances, as Vedic texts direct, to Yudhishthir and Bhima, who as elders earned respect. He hugged his equal Arjuna, his peer and lifelong friend, and took the praise the younger twins were happy to extend. The Pandavas' queen Draupadi was chaste beyond reproach. She dearly loved Lord Krishna, whom she timidly approached. His traveling companions, meanwhile, took their honored seats. Queen Kunti then arrived, and all the greetings were complete. Queen Kunti loved her nephew, whom she had longed to see for years. Emotion choked her throat and filled her eyes with blissful tears. Since she had lost her husband, life had caused her much distress. Remembering Lord Krishna's help, she made this short address. My dear Lord Krishna, in our grief you have given us such help. You kindly sent your father, and at last you have come yourself. You are everyone's well-wisher. You treat everyone the same, and yet you please your devotees and add to their acclaim. Queen Kunti's son, King Yudhishthira, continued on this theme. By grace we have your presence and your help in our regime. Though we are fools, please stay with us until the rains have passed. The Lord complied, and kingdom-wide delight was unsurpassed. Since warriors were allowed to hunt by Vedic moral codes, Arjuna drove Lord Krishna through the kingdom's forest roads. His chariot held mystic weapons useful in pursuit of rhinos, tigers, boar, and deer. The pair would stalk and shoot. Arjuna's servants packed the corpses, carried them away, and used them all for sacrifice. So doing, all the prey gained new and better bodies through the power of the priests who would consummate the sacrifice and benefit the beasts. Arjuna, feeling thirsty, saw the Yamuna nearby. Lord Krishna came and drank with him till both were satisfied. Just then they saw a lovely girl with charming face and hips. At Krishna's hint, Arjuna went to question her like this. Who are you, lovely lady? Is this place your native land? Your father, is he with you? Are you here by his command? Who is your father? Do you seek a husband in these woods? Please help us understand these things so we see you as we should. The woman named Kalindi said, my father is the one that you would know as Surya, or the god who rules the sun. He built for me a mansion in the Yamuna nearby, where I reside and spend my time, just as you have implied. My husband will be Vishnu, or I'll have no mate at all, to satisfy the Lord with whom I've always been enthralled. I put myself through penance and divine austerity in hopes he will be satisfied and someday marry me. This sweet account, which Krishna knew, was all he had to hear. Kalindi on his chariot, he went to Yudhishthira. In splendid Indraprastha, which the Lord had helped to build by calling Vishwakarma, whose construction is most skilled. Lord Krishna stayed for weeks until, with matters to attend, he went back home to Dwarka with fiancé and friends. And then, when every planet showed auspicious qualities, he wed Kalindi lavishly and pleased his devotees.
Satya and more. Duryodhana detested all the Pandavas' success and gathered allies who imbibed his poisoned consciousness. Two brothers named Vindhya and Anuvindhya held such hate, but Krishna wed their sister, which they could not tolerate. The sister, Mitravinda, in the classic Veda way, prepared to choose her husband on her Swayamvara day. Her heart was set on Krishna, which her brothers found obscene, but when the Lord rode off with her, they could not intervene. Then Krishna heard that Nagnajit of Kausala decreed Satya, his lovely daughter, would be his who could succeed in taming 7 vicious bulls. Forever discontent, these bulls had blades for horns and couldn't stand a warrior's scent. Lord Krishna knew King Nagnajit and, with a massive force, went promptly to his friend to meet this challenge at its source. King Nagnajit, delighted to see Krishna, left his throne and gave Lord Krishna more respect than he had ever shown. Lord Krishna offered his respects. Satya, the lovely maid, observed her latest suitor and immediately prayed, as I have kept my vows as well as any woman can, may Providence arrange that somehow I may wed this man. If Goddess Lakshmi, Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, and the rest of all the gods and goddesses were here, they would request the dust of Krishna's lotus feet. To save humanity, he incarnates himself like this. May he be pleased with me. King Nagnajit first worshipped Krishna, seated him and said, "What can I do for you, my lord, but simply bow my head?" Lord Krishna, smiling from the royal throne he'd been allowed, addressed the king in pleasing words that rumbled like a cloud. "The sages say that kings like you and me with men and land should not engage in begging nor extend an empty hand. And yet to build our friendship, if the match can be arranged, I ask to wed your daughter, though I've nothing to exchange." The king replied, "My lord, to see she'd wed a man like you, I've bound her to a hero's task I'm certain you can do. These 7 wild bulls have broken many suitors' bones. Defeat them, and my daughter shall belong to you alone." The Lord then pulled his belt, and 7 Krishnas came in view. Each one fought with a bull until the beasts were all subdued. As Krishna coalesced again and tied the bulls with ease, Satya saw how, despite his other wives, she could be pleased. King Nagnajit then gave Satya to Krishna with delight and held a wedding festival with joyful Vedic rites. Satya, her mother, and the court were filled with ecstasy, and common people shared the mood of great festivity. The mighty Nagnajit bestowed a dowry for the bride that reached such great proportions it could not be quantified. The multitudes of maidens, cows, and elephants surpassed its hordes of men and chariots, which in themselves were vast. The king sent this beloved couple off with much remorse aboard the royal chariot amidst a mighty force. This proved to be prescient, for on the road, in fact, a slew of jealous, disappointed rival kings attacked. Before, the 7 vicious bulls had overwhelmed these kings. Now Arjuna and other soldiers managed the same thing. They parried every king's attack with fortitude and skill, as lions drive off jackals who attempt to steal their kill. Lord Krishna, who ruled Dwarka and all the Yadu clan, returned with his new bride and her vast dowry to his land. As citizens applauded them with boundless happiness, Satya and Krishna entered their palatial home in bliss. But Krishna wasn't finished. He had many wives to wed, for he expands in countless forms, as we've already said. Bhadra came as a gift, then Lakshmana by strength of force, and Krishna married 16,000 others in due course.
16,000 queens, said Vishnurata. How did he wed 16,000 queens? I've heard that Boma kidnapped and imprisoned them unseen. When they were only princesses, please tell me what occurred when Krishna killed that scoundrel and released the captive girls. Well, the villain Boma stole King Indra's mother's jeweled rings, umbrellas of Varuna, and still other godly things. When Indra asked Lord Krishna for assistance, he replied that he would go at once with Satyabhama at his side. Aloft on Garuda, Lord Krishna and his fearless wife flew off to see to Boma, who was causing all this strife. They found his kingdom fully ringed by sharply slicing wire and a slew of deadly weapons and a moat of blazing fire. Lord Krishna's spinning disc broke up the moat and doused the fire. Lord Krishna's shining sword sliced through the labyrinth of wire. Lord Krishna's arrows caused the demon's weaponry to fall, allowing Krishna's club to smash the daunting fortress walls. When Krishna blew his victory conch, he broke the magic spell, protecting Boma's fort and all his soldiers' hearts as well. It also roused a sleeping beast of 5 ferocious heads, named Mora, who had made the fortress moat his waterbed. The horrible Mora blazed brighter than the sun. His 5 massive mouths roared and frightened everyone. Like venom, some poisonous snake reared back and spat. His trident flew straight at Garuda's feathered back. Lord Krishna's first arrows broke up the trident's flight. His next arrow struck Mora's faces left and right. The furious demon then hurled his deadly club, expecting to leave his foe crushed in streaming blood. Lord Krishna threw his club, abruptly smashing both. Then Mora, upset, raised his arms and screamed an oath. He rushed at his foe to destroy him with his fists, but Krishna lopped off his 5 heads with his disc. Deprived of its heads, Mora's corpse splashed in the moat as hilltops are felled by Lord Indra's thunderbolt. His 7 sons joined in their father's failed assault, till Krishna's sharp arrows brought that fight to a halt. On seeing his guardians thoroughly destroyed, the demon Boma furious instantly deployed his elephant soldiers and all his entourage to bury their foe in an unrestrained barrage. Garuda flew Krishna and Satyabhama high. They looked like a cloud bank with lightning in the sky. Lord Krishna rained arrows on Boma's Vishnu's troops. Their pierced limbs and mountains made the field a bloody soup. Garuda swooped down on the elephant array and using his talons drove all of them away. Jai Garuda. His elephant army destroyed and overthrown. The Bhiman Boma stood before Krishna all alone. Then Boma's sharp spear struck Garuda harmlessly, who looked like an elephant tickled by a flea. As frustrated Boma prepared his trident next, Lord Krishna's sharp chakra went sailing through his neck. The gem-studded head of the demon hit the ground, and the gods showered flowers and made triumphant sounds. The goddess of earth, Bhumi, brought the stolen goods, gave gifts, and said prayers to Lord Krishna as she stood. Respects to you, my Lord, who dwells in every single heart. You bring your disc to help like this. You play so many parts. Primeval, all-pervading one, creator absolute. My boundless Lord, I offer my obeisances to you. The lotus-like depressions on your abdomen adorns the lovely lotus garland, Krishna, draped about your form. Your cooling lotus glances make the imagery complete, including all the lotus marks embellishing your feet. You craft the mode of passion when you bring about creation, and then the mode of ignorance when you want devastation. As everything's maintainer and enjoyer, you are linked to all of your creation, yet you're separate and distinct. Illusion makes us think that fire, water, earth, and air, the mind and senses, gods, in all of which we are aware, are independent, separate units standing on their own. In fact, they are within you and belong to you alone. I gave birth to this Boma, yet his sins disgusted me. My Lord, here is his son who has frightened terribly. Please place your lotus hand which conquers sin upon his head. Protect him, please, for you can shelter those beset with dread. Content with Bhumi's humble prayers, Krishna blessed the boy. He then entered the palace evil Boma had enjoyed. Beside the demon's treasures, jewels and silks and other things, were many kidnapped maidens, all the daughters of great kings. These 16,100 princesses concurred. The handsome man who freed him was the one they wished to serve. May Providence allow this man to marry me, they prayed, as each one thought of Krishna in her own distinctive way. The Lord provided every princess spotless new attire and sent them all to Dwarka to fill their heart's desire. He also sent off horses, treasure elephants, and such that Boma had collected, and indeed he'd stolen much. With this encounter finished, Krishna took his wife and left to take back to the heavens all the gods had lost to theft. When Satyabhama asked him for a parijata tree that Indra grew in heaven, Krishna instantly agreed. The most exquisite flowers issued from this famous tree, but Indra cried, "It's mine!" So Krishna took it forcefully. Although he gained Lord Krishna's help and bowed to him as well, this Indra was ungrateful. May his riches go to hell. Lord Krishna, back in Dwarka, assumed a separate form for each and every princess. When their weddings were performed, each one had her own palace too. What ordinary man could even dream of doing things that God, Lord Krishna, can? Extraordinary Krishna, who cannot be understood, led household life with every wife as any husband would. His smiling, joking wives exchanged with him a mood of love, then left Brahma and other gods bewildered up above. 100 servants waited, but the queens had such a taste to rub their husband's feet or cool his head with sandal paste, or dress his hair, or bring him garlands, gifts, and pan to chew, that all the servants had to find some other work to do.
Having a very exciting morning today. Lots of blood. You Hare Krishnas are weird. You like to hear stories about blood. Hare Krishna. So these scenes are quite dramatic. And they could have just been very simple, where Krishna went to the home of one of these brides, or one of these brides went to his home, and the father said, "Will you marry my daughter?" And Krishna said yes, and it's over. Not very exciting, right? You know, there are certain people in this world who have very exciting lives and they don't do anything, just kind of ordinary. You know such people, or you read about them, or maybe you had a friend like that. if he drove down the street, he would drive like 100 miles an hour and just, he wouldn't do ordinary things because that's like, for them, it's boring. And also because they can, sometimes people do something extraordinary and then you ask them, why did you do that? And they say, because I could. I have the ability or I have the money. So I did it. Like, why did you fly out of this air, jump out, parachute, and fly here or there? Because I could, because I had the money, the ability. So how would you expect Krishna, the Supreme Person, to do these things? Just, go to a church and have an ordinary wedding. And, we read about it in Bhagavatam and fall asleep while we're reading. So I was thinking on the way over here that boxing is an extremely popular sport, isn't it? Yeah, it's big. Boxers make 5-10 million in one fight. It's quite profitable, and you have mixed martial arts, which is, I think, also popular. And of course, there are always people that want to join the military. So there's always people that like to fight and people that like to watch fighting. And we heard in Vedic times, the wars were more like sporting events. They followed strict rules, starting and ending times. And people would line up on the sidelines. So there'd be a battlefield, which is kind of like a stadium. And it would start at a certain time. Maybe it was sunrise to sunset. It would start and you could watch the battle and you would be safe because anyway, it was a different form of battle. And so people would watch it. They enjoyed watching the fight, even though so many people are getting killed. So you might think this is a bit grotesque, or that people like to see people getting killed, or people like to see people, like if you're a man and you go to a boxing match, if nobody gets knocked out, it's like anticlimactic. You like to see someone get knocked out. It makes it more exciting. So what is our philosophy? Our philosophy is no propensity can exist within us if it doesn't exist within Krishna. So if you may wonder why Krishna is involved in so much killing, so much fighting, he likes to do that. Now, you could sit here and think, well, for God, I don't think that's like a good idea. It sets a bad precedent. Well, it's too late, because whatever tendency he has, we have, and you can't do anything about it. Even in ordinary life, we see a lot of fighting. Somebody cuts you off and you scream at them. So the fighting propensity is there. And it gives Krishna pleasure. And he has to come to the material world to do this, because it's not, it goes on in the spiritual world, but not really. It's kind of an illusory way. They have, like, it is said, for example, in the spiritual world, Krishna will go to Mathura to kill some illusory Kamsa. Periodically, he'll go in some kind of illusory Kamsa that he kills and he comes back. Have you heard about that? Illusory Kamsa. Prabhupada used to say there are rumors of demons. But more specifically, there's some, you could say it was a rumor, like, where is that Kamsa that Krishna killed? You can't find him. But there was some Kamsa that appeared, or some rumor of a Kamsa, some illusory, then he would go. So, but here in the material world, then Krishna has opportunity to kill. And he likes doing it. So this is kind of a bit of a challenge to our moral sensibilities, isn't it? We're reading stories in a religious institution about our God killing people and enjoying it and having fun. Of course, there's a backstory. And the backstory is, or maybe you could call it the forward story, is that everyone who's killed by Krishna is liberated. So naturally, we can ask the question, if we have to die, which we do, and something's going to kill us, either old age or some disease, or a car accident, or a plane accident, or a train accident, or what else, some accident, or a bullet, wouldn't it be better to be killed by Krishna if you had a choice? So if you read these stories and go, well, why is he doing that? You can think in another way. I wish I was that person being killed by Krishna, because that would be the ultimate darshan, and Krishna would touch me. So I was also thinking there in the Bhagavatam here, which describes, I can't remember if it's this chapter or the next chapter, because I was reading both chapters this morning, but just descriptions, more detailed descriptions of these battles. And in Vedic times, they had what we would consider missiles, and these demons had all these kinds of weapons. And it describes in the Bhagavatam that Krishna was destroying these missiles with arrows. He'd shoot multiple arrows at one time. And so we know, because we see and we hear about what's going on today in the world, in Ukraine, the war. And Krishna single-handedly is like destroying missiles with arrows, like all the missiles, like none of them got through. All the weapons destroyed just with his arrows. And you might be thinking, okay, how was that possible? Would you like me to explain how that's possible? Like multiple missiles can be destroyed with arrows. What kind of arrows could destroy a missile? No, I can't exactly explain it, but I have a verse that explains it. And you all know this verse in the 10th chapter, when Arjuna's trying to understand Krishna's opulence, and Krishna says, you really shouldn't try to understand, because it's pretty vast. And so Krishna says, you see this whole creation that I created with like a fragment of my Shakti, like this. If there was a little piece of dirt here and I just went like that to knock it off the table, you might say that's a fragment of my Shakti. It doesn't take much energy, but just knock it off. So basically Krishna is saying, I created the whole universe like that, and you're trying to figure out the extent of my power. I can create a whole universe with, in my sleep, basically. So that's how he destroyed and fought. And then you might say, well, how much fun is it for Krishna to fight if he's like, he can just do that and kill everybody, but still it's fun. He likes doing it. So now, what I find interesting, and I think a lot of times we don't do this, is to try to understand, for lack of a better word, God's psychology, to try to understand Krishna's psychology. Like, he likes to fight even though he could destroy the whole universe like that. He's taking weapons and squaring off with opponents, and as we described here, killing bulls. It's like, it doesn't seem like a big deal, it seems like, what's his name? Mike Tyson fighting a 2-year-old baby. It's like, it doesn't make sense. But Krishna can create, and Yogamaya can create any situation where it could even appear to Krishna, if he wanted, that he was losing, or this was a difficult fight, or whatever. So the point underlying everything I'm saying is that the whole universe evolves around Krishna's will and desire. And this is what he desires. And if we ever think, no, that's not good, he killed this person, we have a problem. Because his will is supreme, and our moral position of right and wrong has nothing to do with ultimate morality, because ultimate morality means what Krishna desires. That's ultimate morality. And the whole universe exists to fulfill his desire, and we exist to fulfill his desire. So anything he does, we have to say, hip, hip, hooray, right? We have to say that. We can't say, why did he do that? That wasn't nice. That was bad. Because nothing he does can ever be bad. Even though we may think from a material perspective, it could be, it's not. But ultimately, as a devotee, we exist to facilitate Krishna's enjoyment. However, I don't know if that scared you, because we didn't come to the material world to do that. So, we came to facilitate our own enjoyment. So the idea of existing to facilitate someone else's enjoyment, that could sound not politically correct, right? And we could have lots of issues about that. But there's another side. If you look at all these stories, what is Krishna doing in all these stories? He's meeting these women, and then 16,100 women that were captured by Bulmasur. He's meeting them. They're seeing him. They want to marry him. And he's saying, yes, I will marry you. So what is he doing? He's facilitating their desire in a specific way for a specific relationship. So they wanted a relationship with Krishna as wives. Everyone we heard about wanted that relationship. Krishna knew he wanted to do some drama around that to make it interesting. But in every case, he was fulfilling their desire for a particular relationship. So what's interesting, you may know this, but what's interesting, in these pastimes, Krishna is not in Vrindavan. He's out of Vrindavan, and when he's outside of Vrindavan, he has a different form. And so why does he have a different form when he's outside of Vrindavan? He has that form to reciprocate with the relationship the devotee wants. So Krishna takes forms to fulfill the desire of his devotee. So you could, in one sense, in a broad sense, say those forms are created by the devotee, because that's the form the devotee wants Krishna to reciprocate it. So he assumes a form in reciprocation of the devotee's desire. So in that sense, the devotee is creating the form. It's interesting, isn't it? So we as devotees, we exist to ensure Krishna's pleasure, and then he exists to reciprocate with what we want. And that's what we're seeing in all these stories. All he's doing is reciprocating. It's not accidental. There's a backstory to the bulls, which is interesting. Nobody could defeat these bulls. It was impossible. There's no warrior. These are special bulls. No warrior could defeat them. And the king knew that, and he wanted Krishna to marry his daughter. So he thought, okay, here's the stipulation. So nobody could marry his daughter other than Krishna, because nobody could kill those bulls. So there's so many interesting things going around, but his daughter is meant to marry Krishna. Now you might say, are these women eternal associates of Krishna? They just see Krishna goes, this is my husband. It could be, or they could be coming into the Leela and desiring to have that relationship with Krishna. It could be either way. But Krishna, in every case, is just fulfilling their desire. So then you might say, okay, it sounds good. What about my desire for a relationship with Krishna? Whatever it is, Krishna will fulfill it when you're qualified and when you're ready. And sometimes devotees say, when I take the Krishna consciousness, I do my sadhana, sometimes it's difficult. Have you noticed that? Sometimes. Well, really what's difficult is just we're dealing with our own desire. That's what's difficult. But sometimes we feel the difficulty of dealing with our own desire, and then we think, if Krishna wants me to love him, why is he making it so difficult? You ever thought like that? Like it should be easy, if your father wants you to be successful, a successful businessman, why is he only giving me $1 to invest? Why didn't he give me at least 100,000? Doesn't make sense. Because he wants to see what you're going to do with the $1, then he'll give you 2, then he'll give you 4, then he'll give you 8, then he'll give you 16, right? So one devotee wrote Prabhupada with this question, why? Krishna makes it so hard. Why won't he just give us love? Because Krishna's asking us to love him, but it seems like he's making it so difficult. So why won't he give it? And Prabhupada said, because you're not qualified for it, and it would actually harm you if he gave it. Isn't that interesting? It's like you have a cup and you're putting something in this cup that's going to cause it to crack. It's like the cup is too small and too fragile, and the substance you put in is too heavy, it will crack. So the heart can't contain it. So Krishna wants us to build up our heart, make it bigger, so we become qualified. So it's not that he doesn't want to give it, he just wants to make sure we can handle it. He's very willing to give it. But ultimately, whatever relationship you want with Krishna, you will have it. There's a form for that relationship. You have a form for that relationship. And we should always understand that the only reason Krishna may not be fulfilling that yet is our lack of qualification. Because Krishna doesn't mess around. Like Krishna he's the king of rasa. So he's the king of relationships. So what kind of relationships does Krishna have with his devotees? He has relationships which are pure. So if I'm not pure, I'm not qualified fully to enter into that relationship until I'm pure. And Krishna, although he wants to reciprocate, cannot reciprocate with someone who's not yet pure. I often give the example that in the spiritual world, you can fulfill any desire you have. There are desire trees, there's Chintamani stone, the milk of the Surabhi cow, all of this will fulfill all your desires. So could you imagine in the material world where the conditioned souls live, if that were the situation, that every tree could fulfill every desire? Every cow could you imagine what kind of, I don't even know if the world would exist anymore. Probably we'd all be dead or in prison if every one of our desires was fulfilled, right? I mean, just imagine. Just imagine if everything that sprung to your mind, every thought, I'd like this, I wish that person would go away. I like that guy's wife, or I like that guy's husband. I wish that student who's getting all the A's would just die. So jealous. And think of every desire that just, even if you said, well, I wasn't serious, well, it's too late. Because if that were the nature of the world, then everything you think of would come. Like there's a story of the man who's sitting, he doesn't realize he's sitting under a desire tree, but he starts thinking of things and things manifest. And he realizes, well, I'm under a desire tree. This is amazing. So he's thinking how this works. And he says, but what if a tiger comes and eats me? And that's what happened. Because it's a desire tree, So you could imagine in the material world, well, what if I'm afraid of flying? What if the plane crashes? Yeah, then it's going to crash. What if we get in a car accident? It's going to happen. What if this marriage doesn't work out? It's not going to. You could imagine it can't work. So that's why Krishna cannot fulfill all these desires until we're pure. So when we're pure, the only desire we will have is to satisfy Krishna. And therefore, in the spiritual world, every desire is fulfilled because every desire is for the service of Krishna. And Krishna is the same with us, but he can't do that for us until we can do it for him. So he's waiting for us to get to this point of purity so that he can reciprocate. So Krishna is like, he's got the millions of dollars. The Father's got millions of dollars to give you to invest in the business, but he just wants to see that you can use it. That's all he's waiting for. Why don't you give me the money? I'm waiting to see. So it's the same with Krishna. So if you ever think why Krishna isn't giving love, look in the mirror. That's the reason. It's us, it's not him. He's waiting to give the money, but he's waiting for us to be able to utilize it. Hare Krishna. So we're supposed to have questions. Okay. If there are questions, I don't know. I could collab on if they're not. Yes. Govinda.
So I was thinking on this point, that if he gives us, if the cup is not able to contain it, then it's not proper. Or if we're not pure, then we'll abuse But then Krishna has the power to make us pure.
Not against our will. He'll never do that against our will. Only he has the power to make us pure. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, yeah, like, I guess there's degrees of desires. Sometimes we have a strong desire and he could make us pure in that instant, but let's say he doesn't make us wait. So
He's making us pure according, okay. Maybe you remember, some of you, we did this exercise once here, and we asked the question, what if I fully surrender to Krishna, what if, and then you fill in the blank. And I do this all over the world. And I actually ask people, ask devotees, do you have any hesitancy about fully surrendering? Or I give them a test on a scale of 1 to 10. How much hesitancy do you have? And everybody generally has some fear. And if I surrender to Krishna, I lose my independence, he controls me, and I won't be happy or whatever. That's your answer, why he can't give love. Because until that's gone, you see, Prabhupada says in Nectar of Devotion, Krishna is controlled by love. If he gives love, he'll be controlled, and he doesn't want to be controlled by someone who doesn't have that fully surrendered attitude, because that's the attitude he has. So he wants reciprocation, and that's what he's waiting for. And he's overly anxious to give it. Now, you could say Mahaprabhu gave love to so many people, he just saw them. Yeah. So we missed out on that one. But, one would consider those people were probably for many lives waiting and cultivating and qualified. Or you could say at that moment, when they saw Mahaprabhu, they were ready. But there's also this story of Narada Muni offering the blessing to take anyone back to Godhead, and Krishna telling him, people don't want to go back to Godhead, and Narada Muni doesn't believe it, and he offers that blessing to a devotee. The devotee keeps postponing, come back later, I'm not finished. So these are meditations we can have, like I have a little drum in my head. You go back to Krishna, Krishna embraces you, and then he asks you a question, what took you so long? And what are you going to say? Why did you stick around so long? And so that's a reflective question, like, why am I still here? And why also am I still not fully pure? What am I holding on to? What's going on here? When am I afraid to give up? And it's those things that are getting in the way of Krishna being able to give that love, because he doesn't want to dance with someone who doesn't fully love him, because he fully loves them. And that, fortunately or unfortunately, however you look at it, that's the requirement for relationship with him. A lot of us think, later I'll be qualified. That may be true. It may take time. Slow, steady, stay in the process. But these reflections are always important. So Krishna's saying, let's put it more directly. Krishna's saying, what was so important that you spent so many lifetimes in this world and you were afraid to surrender to the world? And then you go back in your mind. There must have been so many important things. What was I trying to do? Right? And it's also interesting because the material tendencies we have in this world, whatever it is, to become successful at whatever, those are tendencies that we didn't just develop in this lifetime. They're already there. So if you have this to say, I want to become wealthy in this life, probably it's because you were cultivating that, or you were already wealthy in your last life. I want to become great at this. It's probably because you were practicing it in the last life or 1,000 lives. So it's still going on. So that attachment is there. I want to be, the wealthiest man in the world, because in my last life, I was only the second wealthiest man in the world. So this is how it works, right? And then you become the wealthiest man in this life. And so what does that mean? The next life, you want to continue that. Prabhupada said, I was told that Ravi Shankar, the great sitarist, actually his wife was better, but he was jealous of her, and did you know that? She was a better sitar player, but he kind of pushed himself in front. But anyway, Prabhupada said Ravi Shankar has been practicing sitar for 1,000 lifetimes. So he's naturally attracted to excelling at it. So it's just interesting to note that if you have a strong material ambition, it's probably been cultivated, and maybe you achieved success in your last life. So Krishna's asking you, so what is so important that you spent so many lifetimes? Maybe you could figure that out by just knowing your nature. I never had the perfect relation. I want to have the perfect marriage. I never had it. I'm searching for the perfect, I wanted to be a Hollywood star. I never had it. I wanted to be whatever, or I just wanted my ego fans and so forth. And I didn't get it enough in the last million lives. I'm trying again. So when you dissect this whole process, then you imagine Krishna is asking you what was so important. You obviously you can't answer because nothing could be that important to get in the way of that relationship. So what are you going to say when Krishna says what was so important? You're going to put your head in embarrassment, right? So it's a nice meditation. We can think of that now. Like, what is so important? What is more important than that relationship? And he's willing to give it. We don't deserve it, and he's willing to give it, and we're like, yeah, but like you're telling Krishna, yeah, but that doesn't make sense. God is willing to extend himself in a relationship and give you pure love, and you're like, yeah, but I got some things to do first. And Krishna's like, oh my God, what a loser. I'm giving you love, and you want to start a rock band or something. And you're 52 years old. You got 26 guitars. I need one more guitar before I die. It's like, what is it that's so important that you would sacrifice that for your relationship with Krishna? So when you look at it that way, you can't say anything to Krishna. What are you going to say? You just sit there and cry. It's like, I'm such an idiot, How stupid am I? Yes.
Thank you very much for these meditations. I was just wondering, what if you're thinking about like, oh, why can't I surrender to Krishna and trust and let his will be done? And it's because you're afraid of getting hurt
By
other people.
Oh, not by him.
No, not by Krishna. Well, it's like, I mean, everything is Krishna, so in a sense, maybe it is that. But if it's like,
Okay.
I can't surrender because I just feel.
I think we need a whole seminar on that topic. I would give a general answer. I mean, there's two aspects. If I'm afraid of getting hurt, it probably means I've been hurt, and that fear is a response to the past. So at least we should understand that. And then I'm bringing that material fear into my spiritual life, and I'm using it to I'm transposing it on the spiritual, and it's blocking me. So we should at least understand that and try to heal that fear in some way. But another thought, more spiritual thought, I personally would not allow anything to get in the way of my relationship with Krishna, no matter, if it was a trauma from the past or yesterday someone screamed at me or whatever. I would always try to work through that, because that relationship with Krishna is too valuable to allow something like that to get in the way. And, you can imagine going to Goloka, going into the gates, and they're saying, no, you can't go because you have this fear of surrender. You, again, putting yourself in the context of eternity, these things become very small. It's like, I can have this eternal relationship. This is a flash right here. These millions of lifetimes is a flash in eternity. And I can have this eternal relationship with Krishna. The more we hear about Krishna Lila and the pastimes of Krishna, the more this becomes like really insignificant, or for lack of a better word, stupid. And I don't want to be insensitive, because these things are real and we feel these things. But in light of eternity, if that's going to block me from my relationship with Krishna, it is stupid. Seeing what Krishna offers us. And I think it's also important to be able to relish Krishna consciousness deeply. Because then you realize that's what Krishna's offering, and I'm getting a millionth fraction of that, but that's what's available. And instead of that, I'm allowing some fear or other condition to prevent me from going there. It's a good meditation. Yes.
Just kind of continuing along the point that Christina just raised. Because sometimes we tend to monitor our the quality of our service by how pleased the devotees are with what we're doing, right?
Okay.
So what if it becomes very clear to us, or we're inspired, or we're guided in a certain direction to do a particular service, but then it's the devotees who disapprove or criticize us. I'm just saying, for example, Rita Nandaraj, she was so inspired with Krishna West. She felt, this is what Krishna wants me to do. I have to do this. This is my surrender to Krishna. If I don't do this, I won't be surrendering to Krishna. But as a result of doing that surrender to Krishna, he was criticized and banned from temples and, all that. So how does that work?
Havi Prabhu told me a story. He said, Havi Prabhu is a musician, and he has many hit songs. And he said, whenever he'd bring a song into the company, the record company, for them to review, if everyone liked it, it was never a hit. It was only when half of them liked it and half of them hated it that it became a hit. So I can tell you what I do when these things happen. I try to be sincere. I try to be aligned with Prabhupada's desire and do what I do best and what I know best. And if someone doesn't like it, I would consider that. But sometimes they don't like it because they don't understand it, or they just don't like me. So whatever I do, they won't like. There are people like that. So if in your heart you're being sincere and trying your best, and that Prabhupada is, and you get a sense that Prabhupada is pleased. I see, and you see this also, that a lot of times maybe someone questions what we're doing, but in your interaction, you see how you're helping so many devotees. So like, how could you not? Like I know with Maharaj, many people criticize him, and I understand why. But I think it's also a certain level of misunderstanding that everything has to be homogeneously only one way, because we're a young movement. And I think hundreds of years now, when people hear that Krishna West was criticized, they won't even be able to figure out why, because our movement will be so multifaceted. But there is a section of devotees that without something like that would be alienated from ISKCON. Just as there's a section of devotees without something very traditional would be alienated from ISKCON. We have different devotees. And so he sees that personally, because he gets letters and people say, thank you for doing this, just as they say, how could you do this? You're corrupting. So sometimes you have to, evaluate everything. And if you feel you're sincerely doing your best, then and people are benefiting from it, how could you not continue? I mean, take in consideration what other people are saying, but a lot of what other people say is not it's not educated. They don't know. They don't know what you're doing. I'm not so controversial. Occasionally I get criticized, but I always think the people who criticize me have no idea like what I do. They don't travel with me. They don't see the effects. And obviously, if I'm doing something that's having bad effects, I'm smart enough to notice that it's disturbing devotees. It must not be what Prabhupada wants. They're not seeing Prabhupada through me. We talk about this in the self-care course, that sometimes you have to just pat yourself on the back because you know your own sincere, that you sincerely tried your best. Not everyone will appreciate your best, right? But if you sincerely tried your best, what more can you do? You can't do better than your best. And people will beat you up for doing your best, but at least don't beat yourself up for doing your best. And we have to end class. So I will say something. It's a beautiful saying. I don't know who said it. People may criticize you. Not may, they will. People will criticize you, but never give any evidence to your actions that what they're criticizing you of is valid. It should always be, their criticism should always be invalid. There can be nothing they can point to that would validate their criticism. Your actions should always invalidate their criticism. So people may say so many things, but don't give any evidence of that in your life, that it's true. And then, you know, you're, what else, but more can you do? Welcome to the material world. People come here to criticize. And, you know, it's like, as I say, you might have criticized a few things before you're a devotee, but, you know, politics and religion, that's where criticism achieves its highest. That's why some people say, I don't talk politics and religion. I think religion's even worse than politics. So, you know, you think about before you were a devotee, you had less things to criticize, right? Your friends went out, got drunk all night, and you're like, cool. I wish I was with you, and do all kinds of degraded things. So in your mind, that's like fantastic. But you become a devotee, now you have 4,326 things you shouldn't do. So that's 4,326 more things to criticize than you had before. And so sometimes devotees say, I'm more critical now. Well, you have more things to criticize. And if you're insecure and you can't be happy that someone else is advancing or be happy that someone else is successful, then you will hit those 4,327 things in your mind. They'll just come up and we'll shoot it at those people. For me also, I understand that some people need to criticize. It's unfortunate, but they just need to. And so you provide fodder for them. And you know, your success, the more you're successful, the more fodder you give them sometimes. Hare Krishna. Welcome to the material world, everyone. If I were you, I would get out as soon as possible because these crazy things are going on here, and it's just how it is. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai, Premanandi.